All right, can you all hear me clearly? Cool. Okay, let's get started. All right, malolele everyone, and warm Pacific greetings to all of you who have joined us tonight, whether it's via Zoom or through Facebook Live. Yeah, welcome to our webinar series on the Pacific Pay Gap. My name is Robin Lisa Telepaiti. I am the Human Rights Advisor here for Pasefika at the Human Rights Commission, and I'll just be opening and closing tonight's session. We have an amazing lineup for you all, and yeah, I just wanted to give a brief structure to how tonight's webinar is going to go. We'll just give a brief overview of what the Pacific Pay Gap is about. Then we'll hand it over to our panelists, and then we have a section of Q&A later on this evening. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. If you're on Facebook, we're also monitoring that. So yeah, feel free to comment and share your questions with us. So before I introduce our amazing panel and our facilitator, you know, as we do in our Pacific custom, I just wanted to open the space in prayer, and then we'll get straight into it. So in honor of Tongan Language Week, I thought I would attempt to do a short prayer in Tongan. Let us pray. Ki tau lotu, koe mau tamai oku e he wani, oku mau kolo keke tupau iki. Ai whakatahani, moki mau tolu hono kotoa. Koe mau lotu ia ka lai hiki su. Ko ho mau eki. Amen. Heavenly Father, we just give you all the glory and honor. Thank you for bringing us all here together online. Bless each and every person who has tuned in this evening, and I just pray that you bless our discussions tonight. We pray that your hand be over this webinar session, that it runs smoothly in your mighty and precious name, Jesus Christ. I end this prayer. And we all say amen. All right. So without further ado, I will introduce our wonderful panel that hopefully, I don't know if you can see all of them at the moment, but I'm sure when you do, you know, they'll speak and you'll be able to see them. So first we have Magele Maria Uluilelata. She's from the NZ Council of Trade Unions. We have Gadiel Asiata, E2 National Executive and Komiti Pasefika member. We have Lisa Meto, who is the project manager for the Pacific Pay Gap Inquiry. And then of course, our amazing spearhead for the Pacific Pay Gap Inquiry, our Equal Employment Opportunity Commissioner, Saunoamaali'i, Karanina, Sumeo. So now I'll hand it over to you, Saunoamaali'i.
I love Robin. Maluelele, Nisam Popinaka, Namaste, Noa ia e Maori, Pakalofalahiatu, Kiorana, Talohani, Tena koto katoa, Aloha, Malo lavi soifua, Malo soifua manuia. It is an evening of that's very, very special tonight for our people, as well as for the Human Rights Commission. This is the first time that a national inquiry has been conducted focusing on Pacific peoples. This inquiry is conducted under the Human Rights Act, Section 5. It gives us, the Human Rights Commission, the power to inquire into any law or practice, whether in government or non-government body, if we feel that such practices or legislation and so forth has a possibility of infringing on human rights. Now, the conclusion that has led us to this is because prior to my arrival here, the Human Rights Commission has been engaging with Pacific peoples across Aotearoa. And one of the key themes that's come out of those engagements is people feeling that they are not being treated fairly or equally in their workplaces. So every person in New Zealand, including Pacific people, have the right to equal employment opportunities, have the right to be safe in their workplace, to be free from discrimination. And we all have a right to an adequate standard of living. Those rights are for everybody. It's in binding agreements, human rights agreements that our country, New Zealand, has signed, and we have a duty to uphold those. Unfortunately for our people, for our children, 1 in 4 of every child that's living in poverty is a Pacific child. We know that we are struggling to pay the rent, to pay the power, to pay the water bill, etc., etc. And yet the government of this country has signed an agreement, a human rights convention, where they are duty bound to ensure that everybody has an adequate standard of living, that we have equal employment opportunities, that we are treated equally and fairly, that we have decent work. So hence the need to conduct this inquiry. And we want the inquiry at the end of the day to be helpful for our people, for our business, for our country. We know in a report that was released by Treasury in 2018 that Pacific peoples, through their income, contribute just over $8 billion a year to this economy. On top of that, Pacific-run businesses and our NGOs contribute another $3 billion annually, not to mention the 27,000 hours of unpaid work that we conduct and we contribute to this country. We belong here, and we deserve the very best that this country has to offer. And we do believe that this country can do better. And we know that employment is one part of the chain to closing the ethnic pay gap. Tonight, we're focusing on our places of employment. Of course, we later have to talk about education. Education is a huge part in affecting the pathway for our people to that economic security that we all strive for, to that life of dignity that we all strive for. We will talk about education in another session. I think we also need to have another session where we just talk about us as communities, what happens in our homes that influences the aspirations of our young people, of our children, of our women, of our men. So there are lots of conversations, but tonight we want to focus on the voices of our workers. And so whakaitai lava Magele, Fionga Magele, and also Sunga Gadiel for being here and bringing the voices of our workers so that we can hear and ask questions about what are their experiences and so forth. As a Pacific person, as a Pacific woman, I'm very, very proud to have Lisa here and Robin. You know, as a Pacific person who came as a migrant, the generation of our youth, you know, we aspire for them to go beyond us. And these young women make me so proud. And I'm so proud that they're here leading this inquiry beside me, and also with the support of the Human Rights Commission and a number of other staff who are mostly non-Pacific, but they believe in this cause, and they may also be on this cause. I just want to acknowledge the Human Rights Commission and the support. Before we go further, I want to acknowledge any of our Pacific workers and all of our essential workers that were affected with the incident that happened in New Lynn in Countdown. I want to acknowledge our essential workers wherever they are. If you're a health worker, if you're driving a bus, driving a truck, all our essential workers, because we know Pacific people are concentrated there. You are saving our lives right now as we speak, as we have the luxury of being here on this call, while a number of our people are out there right now, serving our communities and serving New Zealand. I want to acknowledge you. So without further ado, we'll go now on to our panel. But Lava, thank you for being here with us tonight. So Lisa, can I come to you first to talk a little bit about how people can engage beyond tonight in our inquiry?
Saunoamaali'i, talofa lava. My name is Lisa, as has already been mentioned. I'm the project manager for the Pacific Pay Gap Inquiry, and I'm just going to talk briefly about how people can engage in the inquiry. I think the first thing to mention is that we know, and the research shows, that policy and law changes for Pacific people must be by Pacific for Pacific. So that's a very important principle that we're holding, at the centre of this inquiry. Too often policy and law changes are made without proper consultation and input from those who are affected. So we need all of you who are watching this webinar tonight to participate. Please, we need your thoughts, we need your ideas, we need your solutions. And so I thought I would mention the ways that you can participate, how you can let us know what you think. Probably the easiest is to email us. The email will be placed in the chat so you can all see. You can go onto the website, our Pacific Pay Gap Inquiry website, where you will find our online survey. I understand that's also pinned at the top of the chat. We also would love invitations if you're a member of a group, if that's a workplace, a church group, or a sports club. We would love to come and do a workshop with you and your friends, family, to talk about the Pacific Pay Gap. So please, if that's you, then reach out, let us know, as I mentioned, either on our website or through our email. And we need everyone to pass on the message. So many people, when we go and we meet with workers, Pacific workers, people tell us that they had a sense of what the Pacific Pay Gap was, just perhaps from looking around, but they didn't have any idea just how big it was, exactly what it looked like, as is presented on the infographic on our invite tonight on Facebook. So please let your family, let your friends know about the inquiry and how they can participate. Where it's appropriate, please help them to participate. We know that sometimes our older people need help with things like filling in online surveys. So, if you're tech savvy or, computer savvy, then please, help your family members and friends who aren't to participate, particularly during this time, as it is lockdown, obviously, for those of us in Auckland, and those lucky ones who are outside of Auckland. Well, we'll come and speak to you when we join you in level 1. So where to from here? Once we've heard from all the Pacific workers who want to participate, we're going to write up a big report, and that report will make recommendations on how to close the Pacific Pay Gap. And I just finally wanted to mention that this is just the beginning. We're not just going to write a report and, that's nice, put it on the shelf, leave it there. No, after the inquiry is finished, we've written the report, we are going to campaign on how to have those recommendations or those solutions implemented. What does that look like? It looks like lobbying. It looks like, all kinds of activities. So please, do keep in touch, watch the website for upcoming events, and how you can further participate.
Malo, Lisa, and just one more little bit of information. While we want to hear from any Pacific person, we try to, we're particularly interested if you're working or you're running a business in the manufacturing sector. Manufacturing is the 4th largest employer of Pacific people. It's the 2nd largest employer of Pacific people. We have equal numbers of men and women. If you're in the construction sector, construction is the 4th largest employer of Pacific people. And if you're in the health sector, so those are the 3 sectors that we're particularly keen on if you want to engage with us, but actually any sector. And actually, when it comes to being a Pacific person, if you identify as a Pacific person, you're in. I just want to make that really, really clear. And if you need an interpreter, Don't worry if English is a bit of a barrier. We will find an interpreter. We will come to your church if we need to come to your church. Right. So now over to our amazing champions. And I'm always very, very humbled when I talk to our Pacific people in the unions. They're unions, but unions are their ultimate champions of human rights. And thanks to their fight, the ongoing fight, the quality of life, including incomes for Pacific peoples, has lifted over the years. So I want to acknowledge all of our union people. And if that's a hit for people to join a union, there you go. So I'll hand it over now to our sister Magele Maria Uluilelata. Saunoamaali'i Magele.
Yeah, whaatalofa atu le paia ma le mamalu o Awhiele nei pō, malo le soifua malo le soifua maua ma le langi mama, whawhitai le alofo le atua, o mawhai ona tātou whaatasi le nei pō, whawhitai te le lava. So my name is Magele Maria Uluilelata. My late father is Tauiliili Tumua Tuvale Uluilelata, who comes from Luatua Nu'uina Whenga, and my mum is Tangai Leono Sarah Uluilelata, who is from Iwa and Nufuali'i. So I live in Porirua. I am a mother of 4, and I am a grandmother to 1, and her name is Lenny. But I guess for me, I am representing the New Zealand Council for Trade Unions, and so tonight I'm going to be talking about a variety of things. And the first things I will be talking about is about my own experience around the Pacific pay gap, as well as my family's experience, as well as some information about what is happening in the union space. So firstly, I would like to say that I am a member of the PSA, or the Public Services Association, and I sit on the Pacific Pay Gap Inquiry, representing, as I said, the NZ Council for Trade Unions. And basically my role is to give a voice or a perspective of Pacific people across the work sector and union movement in Aotearoa, New Zealand. In addition, I provide a community perspective, as Pacific workers and unionists are part of communities as well, and they're very much interconnected. So tonight, the insights that I will provide will be a combination of both my living experience as a Samoan woman who's been raised by parents who believe in collective leadership, and who also helped me find my voice at a young age. So I'll also be providing some qualitative as well as some quantitative data, but most importantly, I'll be sharing narratives that people have trusted me with to talk about their experiences. So essentially, if I think about my position and who I represent, which is the Council of Trade Unions, one thing that I will like to say is that the Council for Trade Unions essentially are in support of this inquiry, and that they know that there is definitely a gap in the pay that our Pacific people are earning, especially in comparison to their counterparts, and also that they're willing to support this inquiry, which is the rationale behind me being on this inquiry. But what I will say is this, is that we can be better in this space, and that work is being done to better work conditions across a lot of unions in all of the sectors, but there is actually very little being done by the way of addressing the Pacific pay gap specifically. And if I was to talk about my own experience of the Pacific pay gap, I have been employed in roles where I've discovered that my colleagues are being paid more than me for doing similar roles, or roles that are size the same as mine. And the only reason why I found this out is I was actually the person who ended up being on interview panels. So it gave me access to a lot of that information. But most importantly, I'd like to talk about my own family's experience. So I can talk about my family who have had the experience of doing a variety of roles, people who are never remunerated, but they are expected to train people. They are never encouraged to apply for pay progression. I have had family members who are regularly taxed for their cultural and community lens. They will add value to an organisation's reputation, and they are not recognised for, and yet they demonstrate regularly that they can operate quite confidently across a lot of different settings, and they do have a point of difference. They come with transferable skills. Saunoamaali'i, you talk about 27,000 hours of voluntary hours. We talk about our people who have transferable skills. We give our time as volunteers. We provide cultural knowledge, as well as social support and voluntary and unpaid work. And once again, as I said, they are not acknowledged, they are culturally taxed, and some people would actually call it cultural taxation. So that's me in a nutshell. I'll pass that over to you, Gadiel.
Yeah, patai Saunoamaali'i. All right, over to you, Gadiel. Saunoamaali'i.
Thank you. Whakatai lava Saunoamaali'i. Maro lava soifua maua marelangi mama. Let me just start by acknowledging Loa Fionga Saunoamaali'i, and your team, Lisa, Robin, and for the work that you've done for our Pasefika people, and continue to do, and and I guess the need in addressing the Pacific pay gap inquiry. I would like to acknowledge my sister that's just finished, Magele. I know her on a personal level and also on a professional level. So whawhitai lava, Magele, it's a blessing to have you on tonight to be doing this together and sharing this journey together. Just in case you mightn't have caught my name, so talofa lava to all of you that are listening tonight. My name is Gadiel Asiata, and I am a worker at Griffin's Foods in Papakura, Auckland. I'm also the senior site delegate there, and I've actually been a delegate for 20 plus years of my working life. I also hold the position of the Northern Regional Rep on the National Executive for E2 Union, and I'm also the regional rep for the Komiti Pasefika, which is a branch within E2 that enables Pasefika voice through New Zealand and at the executive table, and I'm proud to advocate for our people. More importantly, I'm also proud to be the son of migrant workers, who both left their home of Samoa in the 60s to fill the labour shortage in New Zealand. They both had envisaged the opportunity for a better future, in the land that they had called the land of milk and honey, Aotearoa. My late father, who was a qualified chartered accountant back in Samoa, and upon arriving in New Zealand, he worked as a machine operator in a factory that specialised in weaving, because opportunities for him to carry out an accountant career simply was not an option or available in those days to pursue. My mother, well, she cleaned and mopped the corridor floors of Ward 20 at Middlemore Hospital, and her job title back then was a wardsmaid. And she worked there for over 25 years. Both mum and dad worked long hours and had pride in what they did. To ensure that my siblings and I, sorry, I'm getting a bit teary here. I was always called the Suki Baba in my family. I think, every time you talk about your parents, it hits a soft spot. It's because of their hard work, it's, why we are here today. And, back then, they would juggle shifts just to try and have at least one at home. But, and I guess many of us that grew up in the 70s and in the 80s, mum and dad just simply wasn't home, and our older siblings had to take care of us back then. I wanted to start my talanoa here this evening because when you look back 50 years ago and, fast track it now, things just simply aren't equal for our people. So there are many factors that contribute to the Pacific pay gap, and money is probably one of them, but it's just only one. That is, it's not about money nowadays. It's just not about money. It's about having your guaranteed hours, adequate health and safety at work, and being able to have an equal opportunity to grow within a business with better working conditions. Our union, E2, is the largest private sector union and the union that has the lowest paid workers. We have cleaners, security guards, aged care workers, food and manufacturing, aviation workers, and that's only a few to name. many having to juggle, or many having to manage 2 jobs, working 60+ hours a week on a minimum wage, $20, just to make ends meet, which again, still isn't enough. Many parents are having to leave their children at home and both work, many not being able to afford adequate housing. Our Pasefika workers want to be valued and they want to be respected. Just looking around today, who are our essential workers? And Saunoamaali'i, you touched on it earlier on. Yeah, it is our Pasefika people who are out there in the factories producing and manufacturing food that is keeping our economy going. The security guards that are standing and guarding the MIQ facilities, hospitals and supermarkets. You know, during the last few weeks being in lockdown, it has really impacted on our Pasefika workers. Some of our workers who have to stay home because of alert levels are on 80% or even less of their normal wages. You know, we have heard from some of our members that it's hard to keep safe at work. There is really no hard line taken about appropriate physical distancing and the use of masks, except recommendations, which in my view isn't really enough. Tomorrow night, our union will be co-hosting alongside with our Komiti Pasefika a Facebook Live, and we have invited the Workplace Relations and Transport Minister Michael Wood to ask what are they doing as a government around the current issues with COVID, you know, and the FPAs and the impact that it has on our members, around, especially our Pasefika members. You ask the questions, what have the unions done about the pay gap, Pacific pay gap? Well, our union, in partnership with community groups and faith-based groups, have pushed for the living wage, you know, since 2012, which recently went up this month to $22.75. And, you know, we continue to advocate through many negotiations. We continue to campaign hard and we lobby government and local councils to pay their direct and indirect workers. And we continue to hold these politicians to account. We have also campaigned around the fair pay agreements, or the FPAs, with the Labour government, who made it a promise and writ it in their manifesto to deliver on the FPAs. Well, it is in motion, but it's not there yet. You know, and it is important that we are all supporting FPAs as it addresses the race to the bottom, where the contract is awarded to the cheapest company, therefore undercutting on wages. These are the campaigns that our union are strongly advocating, pushing out. Look, that's not the icing on the cake, or it's not the silver lining, you know, that will alleviate the pay gap, but it is a step in the right direction to try and close that. Our Komiti Pasefika, you know, have been fortunate to be a part of the workshops that and the pilot workshops that you guys have been doing, and you know, it was held by Saunoamaali'i, Saunoamaali'i and your team. You know, we held those workshops in the northern, central, and southern regions, and to be honest, they were really raw discussions. You know, and I thank you for allowing us to have our voice there in that safe space where, you know, at times our people, when they're vulnerable, you know, and they speak with their hearts, and there are raw discussions around the lack of representation of Pasefika at all levels. You know, not being able to have a voice, where our people feel vulnerable and only seem to be good on the floor and not in positions of leadership. You know, there are also feelings that jobs that our people were doing weren't being acknowledged and valued. And I wanted to quote particularly a quote that, you know, one of our members in the central region shared with us when we were there. And the quote goes something like this. So this is what she said: "We do our job with pride, and at times I have no dignity when I am not valued for the work that I do. Why are we still at the bottom, getting minimum wage?" You know, it is time for change, you know, real change, some transformational change that will transform lives. You know, serious changes needs to happen within a system that is not fit for our people to succeed, as it clearly shows and tells that it is not working, and it hasn't been working for a very long time. So Saunoamaali'i and everyone, you know, around the panel, you know, whawhetai, mula wawanoa, and to, and to share my experience and, as a unionist. Whawhatai lava.
Hello, Gadiel, Malo, Saunoa. Both you and Magele have raised a lot of issues, and it's always very emotional. So when we talk about the journey, we've just had the recent apology for the Dawn raids. It's a beginning. One of the things that we could possibly ask the government was to address the ethnic pay gap, if you're serious. So we've had a history of oppression and marginalization that has affected social and economic security for our people. So thank you both for acknowledging our families and the journeys that they've come through. And now it's up to this generation now to push and make things right, to help make things right for our people, so that our children, that intergenerational transfer of hardship and poverty must end here. So whawhatai lava for acknowledging our families. I've been keeping an eye on some questions, and there's a couple. Both of you have talked about, this. I like that term, Magele, cultural taxation. So we've got a question from our listeners who's wondering about remuneration frameworks. Can we look at remuneration frameworks in the public sector, since you're a rep from the Public Service Association? How are you ensuring in that review of remuneration frameworks that we are recognizing cultural competence and so forth, and it's not being taken for free or for granted? When you say it's, we add, that competence adds value to reputations, actually adds profit also. It does add to the profit. But so if both of you can comment about remuneration frameworks and what is happening in that space to make sure that we recognize this skill and pay for it. So Magele, can I come to you first, and then to Gadiel, Moli?
Yeah, I guess I can make a comment in terms of some work that both the PSA and CTU, Komiti Pasefika, have been undertaking. So if I think about, and this is kind of like a roundabout way of answering that, because they are involved in a lot of things. So basically, if I think about the PSA as a specific response to the ethnic pay gap, they haven't actually been pursuing this in the same level as the gender pay gap. They have been involved in things such as starting engagement with things such as Te Kaua Mataaho, which is regarding mahi around ethnic pay gap for both Māori and Pacific and other ethnic groups. If I think about CTU Komiti Pasefika, they have definitely had input around fair pay agreements and a fair pay agreement framework that is responsive to Pacific workers in the industry sectors, and that's work that they're doing with MB, and that's the information that I have on at hand. But Gadiel, you might be able to go into more detail about that.
Thank you, Saunoamaali'i. Oh, thank you, Magele. Yes, Saunoamaali'i. Look, there is definitely work around the FPAs, which ensures that, and I'm going to kill two birds with one stone, because I just want the Q&A, something around experience versus qualifications, which sort of ties into something like this. And look, the FPAs will certainly address it. However, we're at a point with government, because there is a paper that has been brought out right now, and what's left out of the FPAs is around the training, is around the qualification part, which the union is actually advocating and actually trying to push, so that it becomes mandate and become in the FPA. Right now, it's actually sitting outside that. So before it even goes to its first reading, we are pushing so that we sort of address the things around remuneration and the experience. Because look, I think we had spoken about it down Wellington in terms of those that have the skill but don't have the qualification behind it, and I think there needs to be a conversation around how that is, how we work around that. I answered that question, Saunoamaali'i.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a conversation around making sure that, because at the moment you've got methodologies and frameworks that are often written by people who don't have a Pacific lens and they don't understand the way that we operate. So it's definitely about ensuring that we're able to provide a level of influence within that space. And if I could just take this opportunity, sorry. When I started off my spiel, I thought we were going question by question, so I wasn't quite sure what the flow is of this, but I did want to make a statement about what I did think about what was the biggest contributing factor when it came to the Pacific pay gap. And actually what I'd like to say is that what I do think is it's definitely a symptom of something much bigger, and I'm actually going to call it for what it is. It's basically as a result of systemic racism and discrimination. And if I was to take a quote from Dr. Sandy Tofa, she talks about how are we defined and who defines us. And the reality is that until the panther learns how to write and shout, the hunter will always be glorified. So what I mean is this, is the land of milk and honey has been an opportunity for us, for our people to provide our families back home some resource, a way for us to pave our way. And in the late 1950s, the Great Migration began, and we were encouraged to migrate here. And we were specifically targeted to fill unskilled and low-skilled jobs. And for a lot of our people, this was the first time that they were introduced to things like shift work and long hours and extremely bad conditions. And yet there was no practice, there was no legislation that was put into place to protect our people. So in the 70s, in 1973, 1974, when that oil crisis hit globally, and that is actually when I was born, we were suddenly seen as a threat, and that we were seen as people who were taking jobs from New Zealanders, jobs that New Zealanders actually didn't want to do. And then the finger was pointed. We were suddenly blamed for problems and law and order, and then the Great Deportation began, and so began the Dawn Raids. So this chain of events is basically evidence to how our people were perceived in the media and in policy settings. We were called coconuts, we were called bungas, we were called overstayers. And that reason is the reason why, and the reason as to why we came over has actually been forgotten. And the perception who we are has actually been defined by others. Fast forward to September 2021, we are still recovering from this. We are recovering from the Dawn Raids hangover. And unfortunately, in recent events under COVID, we have seen similar stories around essential workers who are essential when this country requires us to be. But once again, we are not remunerated. We are not recognized for our skill. We are not rewarded. And then once again, we're also reminded that Pacific peoples are super spreaders of COVID. And in Tauranga, weeks ago, after an apology on August the 1st, we are asked once again to present our passports. So, as you said, Gadiel, we have had very little change. My parents were not protected, and their children, who were meant to be reaping the rewards of the sweet milk and honey, are actually given this like a carrot on a stick. So this is how it is connected. And in order for us to make this change, the panther needs to write, we need to shout, and we need to use our voice. And I will put this all to you again. How are we being defined, and who defines us?
Well, we have to define ourselves, and we have to claim our space at these tables where these decisions are made. Magele, can I just stay with you? You raised the gender pay gap, that the focus still appears to be very much around the gender pay gap, despite all the evidence. So how can that be shifted? What are the unions doing to shift that so that we look at the ethnic pay gap? Because until we do that, it will be forever an afterthought, right? So what is happening in the unions to get that recognition, so that when you are talking about collective agreements, when you are talking about fair pay agreements, that this is right there, this is included in there, not sort of a trickle down effect. So what can happen in that space?
All I can say for you now, Saunoamaali'i, and I'll have to be honest, that actually there has been a huge focus around the gender pay gap. And as I have specifically said before, we really need to do better and be better in this space. And one of the things I talk about is the fact that there needs to be an investment in our people, whether it be via an organisation or any level of structure, because what we constantly see when we're mobilising our people and we're thinking about how is it that we're going to be able to move our people, is we're often throwing operational tack-ons that actually isn't sustainable. So we need to be at the governance level. We need to be able to influence at that particular level so that we can actually start holding people to account in an investment that they need to make for Pacific peoples.
Okay. Gadiel, did you want to respond?
Yeah, yes, thanks. Just following on from Magele, yes, it is about, and I mentioned it, in my little spiel about having a seat at all levels, whether it be in organisations that we are currently in, whether it be unions and not. But it's not just about having a seat at the table. It's about having the right person at the seat, because we, even us Pasefika, we shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes because we cry and we want, but then we put the wrong person there that actually isn't doing the right job for us. So it is about having that. And, I will, speak on behalf of my union, and in terms of what we are doing, we have a Komiti Pasefika that is quite active, and ensuring that we lock in the voices of our Pasefika. And but you have raised something that's really important around what are we doing about the Pacific pay gap? Is it more so just about the gender? But I will take this back, and actually, put a really big magnifying glass on it and make sure that we're pushing it with our respective unions. So yeah, thanks for that, Saunoamaali'i.
Yeah, okay. Now, I've got a question here which relates to pay transparency, and someone's asked it in terms of NGOs. So I don't know whether you both have to comment, but I'll just put it out there. Are the pay scales transparent in the NGO sector? Or what can we do about it if it's not? Are you both able to respond to that question? Or
that sounds like a Magele question.
What was the question again?
The question is about, are there transparent pay scales in the NGO sector? And basically, if not, what are the unions doing about it, or what can be done about that? Because the health sector, not everybody works in hospitals and DHBs. A lot of people are working for private firms. Yeah. NGOs.
I'll be honest with you, I don't have an answer for that question. Gadiel, could you help me out with this? I do think, though, that it does actually highlight the importance of pay transparency, because actually it will it's basically a solution to be able to hold organisations to account in terms of making sure that workers are valued for the skills that they bring, whether it be a qualification, whether it be a transferable skill, whether it be recognised prior learning. There has to be a level of transparency around how people are rewarded, how people are remunerated, and how it is that they sit on a particular scale. And I think at the moment, the frameworks rely on us not speaking to each other. But if I think about the Pacific Grapevine, we're all talking to each other about who is earning what and what we are recognised for. So I think it definitely highlights an opportunity for us to do more work in that space, and to advocate for that across the affiliate unions.
Great. It's my thing about the fair pay agreements. You can't have fair pay if the pay is not transparent. So, let that be something that we'll put there. Now, one of the things that the Human Rights Commission has discovered in terms of our research is that Pacific workers tend to be the ones that experience unequal pay for some work. So that's come out of some studies, but there is this fear of complaining, of raising it. So, can you talk a little bit about that? How can workplaces make it safer for workers who discover that they're being paid or they fear that they're being looked over for promotions or not being paid equally? How can we make it safer for them? What would be your advice to our business owners who may be listening in on this call tonight? Both of you.
Gadiel, would you like to go first?
You're on mute.
Yeah, Saunoamaali'i, look, it is okay for our people to, I mean, if our people are looked for those positions, it is okay. There is this myth out there, with it comes back to our people shooting our own people in the foot, because it is our people that are doing it sometimes. But our people are just as good. If our people are good to put on an All Blacks jersey, then our people are good for these roles. And and our people are much capable for these roles. Unfortunately, and I will speak quite frank about it, there are other ethnic groups that have come in to New Zealand, and they seem to be what we were back then, just come in with a quiet voice and just do the job. And sometimes they're easy targets. They're easy targets for this, and it sort of puts us on the back foot at times as Pasefika. But yeah, Magele, if you want to follow on.
Saunoamaali'i, can you repeat that question again?
Yes. How can businesses make it safer for, say, Pacific people or anybody else, but since we talk about Pasefika tonight, so that they don't fear, complaining that they're not being paid equally to someone else, like your experience?
Yeah.
So how do we make it safe? Having a policy is one thing.
Yeah. I think one of the things is about actually raising capability in that space, in particular about them being able to understand a Pacific lens of whether it's their worker or whatever, understanding that the kind of the lens that their employees bring, understanding the types of and when I say that, what I mean is that whilst you may be working in retail or working in a job that your supervisor or your manager may just see as a part of a hierarchical structure, the reality is that you may also hold a lot of cultural knowledge and a lot of other transferable skills that are actually able to, I guess, add value to the organization. But you're not going to know that if you don't have a level of capability in that space. So that's definitely one of the things that I would encourage in terms of business owners or people within businesses. If you want to be able to have the voice of and trust actually and confidence of your staff, you've got to be able to meet them halfway and understand what their mode of operation is and the worlds that they come from.
Gadiel, did you want to add anything more to it?
Yeah, just, look, I'm a fob, reading through bloody questions and trying to answer them off the cuff. Yeah, look, I think to make it safe, I think there needs to be education with a lot of our employers to understand our people, to understand the culture, to understand exactly what Magele had said in terms of the hierarchy. I mean, we have respected people, on our factory floors that hold respective titles, whether it be matai titles or church titles, whether they be akiako or ana officer swangi, and understanding what that is, and before they even make it safe, they need to understand, who we are as people. That's what I wanted to add in.
And I think if I can think, if I speak on behalf of the PSA, I know that if there's something that we've learned is about our people knowing our people and our people's mode of operation and the way that, knowing the issues that that may be happening in the workplace. So I know for them, and even though this is in the public sector, there has been basically worked to mobilise itself, and they have had, they've basically had the creation of what they call a Vamuana position, and that's basically Pacific representation on sector committees across, I guess, the public service, the state sector, community, public services, local government and district health boards. And basically they also have somebody that sits in the governance structure or the executive in a position as well. So basically it is not just about building the capability of those who are at a senior level, but it's also making sure that there's a level of representation or people who are going to be able to carry the voices of our people who may not be comfortable in going to see people in culture or human resources or whoever it is.
Malo Fatai. Can I ask, might be a bit of an obvious question, but how would businesses know if they've got a ethnic pay gap if they don't collect ethnicity? What would be some basic steps that you could say tonight to help them? Number one, identify if there is, and number two, measure it. Magele, do you want to go first, and Gadiel?
So the question is, how would they know?
Yes.
Wow, that's a big question. I actually think that they're not actually going to know until they put a stake in the ground and are looking to actually see what change needs to be made. They've got to have a level of wanting to and be willing, and also be willing to engage in some brave conversations, which I think in terms of the submission process is definitely an opportunity for people to be able to take a look at what their current structures are and whether or not there is an area of development when it comes to the pay gap in the organisations. That's definitely a challenge. Because of the fact that it quite often requires a level of honesty and an opportunity for them to change. But if they're not willing, it's never going to happen, unless, of course, they're called out.
Gadiel?
Yeah, I just want to mirror what Magele just said. You know, it's hard at the negotiating table, let alone trying to put this across, to a lot of our employers, because many employers aren't very forthcoming, with some of the stuff, and I'm sorry I couldn't answer that, fully, but the ball is on the other court. And until they sort of indicate that there is a need for, look, we can initiate the conversation, but whether they're going to move off the mark is another story.
Would a good step be to start collecting ethnicity data, like we collect,
Okay, look, Etu Union, we have a system which collects data, on our membership, but it's only membership. It's not the full workforce. That's only half the pie. But in terms of, yeah, it does. Without the data, it's useless. We can't even present anything. But yeah, it does. Data is very important.
Yeah, and if we're talking about data collection and we're thinking about who actually owns that data as well, I think that we then definitely probably need some level of mandated standard across the affiliate unions for ethnic or ethnicity data collection, because actually that's the only way whether you're going to help. That's probably the only way we're going to be able to, or one of the ways we're going to be able to identify whether or not there is some challenges there, or it might reaffirm things that we already know. I'm not quite sure why there is reluctancy for that to happen, but I do know that it's not a best practice across a lot of the unions. Yeah.
I love it. Because definitely one of the things that I hear from businesses is they don't yet even when they ask for ethnicity data, workers don't always report it. So it's hard for them to look at, to measure in people and don't feel, for whatever reason, that they should disclose ethnicity data. So I'm just tabling that for you. There's still a number of questions. I can't ask them all, but we will respond to all your questions. Just reassure our listeners, we will respond in writing, but just picking out a few. So just as a final question, because we're close to the end of time, how can closing the Pacific pay gap help the New Zealand economy? So Gadiel, can I come to you first? Saunoamaali'i.
Hey, look, we are contributing to the economy hugely right as we speak. You know, this is only a boost, you know, up. Saunoamaali'i and your team, when we had invited you into our space, our Komiti Pasefika, I had gone through a session with you with 2030. And, you know, what does 2030 look like? Well, you know, and, you know, I called it the browning of New Zealand. Well, it is, it's the reality. You know, that is what 2030 is going to look like. You know, and without, you know, the economy, there'll be a huge boost in the New Zealand economy, and having our people there, you know, in those key roles, and it's about you know, sustaining that change. If the need of it needs to happen now for enable for us to be able to you know, be able to hold that change when you know, when 2030 comes, which is not long away. Yeah.
Okay. Magele, Saunoamaali'i.
So the question is around what do we need to do, or
How can closing the pay gap help the New Zealand economy?
I think we've kind of already proved our worth. I think you've said that we contribute 8 billion to this economy as it is. And I think in the past, when we first came here, that we've actually proven our worth. And like you said, we belong here. And I think it's an opportunity to actually acknowledge the hard work that we have done over the years to be able to contribute to New Zealand as a whole. One of the things I would like to say, though, is if I was thinking about what the government can actually do right now, is they really need to provide a model of quality practice in the space and be the change. They need to be that model exemplar which sits in the public, which I know sits with the Public Services Commission, and I understand that there's definitely work being there. But like I said before, we still need to better address the issue of the pay gap for Pacific people. And if I'm also thinking about the fact that actually at the moment we probably have the biggest or the largest number of Pacific MPs sitting in government at the moment, I'd just like to make it clear that it actually is not a Pacific people problem. And what I'm saying is that because we have Pacific MPs, it should not be their problem to do all the work on this. And I actually want to see how others are going to be able to support them in raising this issue and raise the visibility of this. Aloha.
Gadiel, I saw you go like this. Did you want to comment?
No, yeah, because like she is right. You know, it's, you know, what is the government doing in this space? You know, they're in a position now. I mean, look, they say we have the largest Pacific, you know, we have 10 people there. We have 10 of our, you know, brothers and sisters there, you know, and this is, it's more so important for them to start moving in this space. You know, as we know that, you know, being in government, it's like a revolving door. You're only there for how long, and then next minute you're out. You know, and it's really important that they start moving, you know, and supporting, you know, this initiative, you know, and you know, yeah. Sorry, I just hate to applaud Magele. Thanks, Magele, for calling it out.
No, thank you all, and thank you for the platform to be able to do that.
Malo lava Saunoa. Before we finish, I just want Lisa. Do you want to say something before we finish our panel?
Well, that's very broad opening. Yeah, I just thank you very much, Magele and Gadiel, for taking time out of your evening to come and speak with us. And I guess to those who are watching, please, I forward you to either email us or fill in our survey. You know, we can't just do this as the Human Rights Commission. We need Pacific people, Pacific workers to be with us. So please reach out, help your family, your friends to get involved. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from you.
Hello. And I just want to reiterate to our participants tonight, when we're talking about closing the pay gap, we're talking about all roles. So we're hearing from Pacific CEOs, we're hearing from senior managers. So whatever role, to close the pay gap, as we talked about, is not just pay for equal work. We want to move up the ladder. As both Magele and Gadiel have talked about, we need to move up the ladder. So getting in is one point, but going up is the other one. And really love to hear from our people in those higher up in hierarchies. Really love to hear from you, please, in terms of what challenges have you faced, and also, what good practices are you seeing to help our Pacific people? Because what we're learning from this inquiry actually relates to other non-Pacific migrants, settlers groups. So it's really important if we're thinking about our Filipino cousins, our anybody else who's come in, they're experiencing similar things. So the learning from this inquiry, we hope, the Commission hopes, will be able to fundamentally help everybody, really. But we must focus on Pacific people because we're at the bottom. It's important. I don't like to say that about our people. That's where we are. It has to change. So whaftai lava Magele, Gadiel for your time again. Whaftai to all of our people who are listening in on Zoom or Facebook. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions, but we will respond to your questions. And keeping in mind, we're just at the beginning, so we don't have all the answers. So if you're looking for a step 1, 2, 3, we don't have it yet because we need to talk to our people. So, but we will we'll be transparent and give updates publicly through our Facebook or whatever else as the inquiry rolls out. So, so you won't miss out. And we're doing our very best to put those things out in 10 different languages we've got now. So we're doing our very best to translate as much as we can. So, Whaftai lava and God bless. Over to you, Robin. Whaftai.
Saunoamaali'i. So yeah, just summarizing what both Lisa and Karanina Saunoamaali'i have said. Thank you all for your questions. Yeah, again, apologies we haven't been able to, get on that keyboard and type to answer them, but they will help contribute to our FAQ that will go on our website. And we'll ensure to keep you all updated through our mailing list. If you do complete our online survey, there are questions there around whether or not you want to take part in a talanoa, and also if you want to keep updated, we'll hopefully be sending out a monthly newsletter on what's going on, where we are in the country. So yeah, our engagement is hopefully out till March next year. So we will, plenty of time to engage with us. Hopefully, prayerfully hoping that, COVID lockdowns sort of will be behind us by then. But yeah, thank you all again for just participating, sharing your thoughts, your insights. Gadiel, Magele, thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us. So I guess now all that's left is really to just end us off, close this amazing space of fruitful discussion, and then have a beautiful evening. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, just thank you again for bringing all of us here together. We've had such a fruitful discussion, and very powerful messages come from our amazing panelists. And I just pray that you bless them, bless their families. We also keep in our prayers the amazing people that are working, our essential workers at this time. We pray for all the families who are suffering, all our Pacific community that are out there helping all of us at this time. And so, yeah, just thank you again. You're an amazing God, and I just give you all the glory and honor. In Jesus' mighty name, I pray. Amen. All right, everybody, have a good night. Stay safe. Be kind. All right.
Come here,